people sign in. While we're here waiting, why don't you go ahead and let us know where you're from? Maybe in the chat, put your name and what city you're from, so we kind of have an idea of all the different locations we're talking to today. Boston, oh, nice. Lafayette, Louisiana. Whoa. Denver, Colorado. Nicaragua, wow. Kentucky, Rochester, New York. We got people coming in from everywhere. Nice. Marble Mount, Washington. South Dakota. All the way from Desiree, Minnesota. It's probably not too far. Another Kentucky. All right, as we go into today's seminar, remember, as the presentation is going along, to put your questions in the chat so that at the end we can come back and have a lively conversation with Otto as he wraps up his presentation. And any of the questions that we don't get to, we'll hopefully get back to you throughout the week. So make sure you put those questions in the chat as we're going along. All right. So everyone, as you can see, Pastor Ed is not with us today. He unfortunately had something else important to attend to, but he wanted me to let everyone know that he's going to miss you, but he's turned you over to the less than capable hands of me. Typically just your moderator, Pastor George Wood, and the author of the Uncovery, and usually the moderating part is my strong suit, but this part is not. So I'm trying to fumble my way through things, but so bear with me, have some grace. But I am excited though, as I said today, because our presenter is Reverend Otto Schultz. He highly qualified. He has a master's of divinity. He's a licensed alcohol and drug counselor, a graduate of Concordia Seminary in St. Louis. He was an ELCA pastor and has been in the substance abuse field for over 45 years. He's trained thousands of people in practical tools for addressing substance use problems and helped hundreds of families intervene successfully. Reverend Schultz is retired as a spiritual counselor at Bryan Medical Center, Independence Center in Lincoln. He has 2 children, and he is, Liam and Lincoln of Matthew, Cairo, Michigan. I believe I threw that. That was pretty good. But he's going to be doing our presentation today. And like I said, I spent some time with him during the last few conferences. An amazing guy. And I'm super excited to hear what he has to say today. But we want to begin with first a moment of silence for those that are sick or suffering, and then I'm going to pray and lead us into today's conversation. So. Father God, we just thank you for today's presenter. We thank you for his life of servanthood. And we just thank you, Lord, for the message that he has for us. And so, Father, we just ask that all of those that are in attendance or all those that hear the replay, Lord God, that this message touches them, reaches them in a way that helps them radically shift in the way that they walk alongside people that are struggling. And so, Lord, we say thank you for today's meeting. We thank you for all those that are on and in attendance. And we ask you, Lord, to just lead the conversation in a way that is powerful and moving. So we thank you, Lord. And so Otto is going to be talking to us today about how to do interventions in a way that is healthy. And at the Center of Addiction and Faith, that is what we try to do. We try to help church leadership. We try to help communities of faith actually walk alongside those that are struggling in a way that is productive, that is helpful, and that is healing. And so Otto is going to talk about the very important fact of what does an intervention look like? What does it look like in a way that is healthy and whole? Because let's be honest, we don't often know what that is. He's doing this presentation today, but it's important to note that he's going to be doing a 4-part presentation in the month of July. And he's going to talk about that in this presentation. It's sort of symbolic of today's presentation, but you can come back on the for his 4-part series, and the link for that is going to be in the chat as well. But I'm just super excited, Reverend Schultz, to have you here to do this presentation today. So welcome. Oh, you're muted. Yeah, everyone, we know we're still muted. We're trying to get to the heart of that right now, so just bear with us.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear
Yay.
you.
Okay, can you transfer the, make me co-host so I can show the video, show the slides?
You should be good to go.
Okay, all right. We're sharing the screen. And yeah. All right. This week, the religious name for this presentation is Let Your Light So Shine, which is from the Christian New Testament. But what we're doing here now is we also call this Flashing Your Brights, which I will explain in a minute. The idea behind this is to answer the question, which is, what do you say? What do you say to a high-risk drinker? What do you say to anybody who's in any kind of trouble, really? How do you think that through? When we got involved with this Flashing Your Brights idea, we said, we do it to resolve an argument. Maybe you've had this inside your head. Maybe you've had this argument inside your head. Maybe you've had it with another person. One side says, you can't make another person change. There's really nothing you can do. And the other person says, wait a minute, we care about this person. We can't just do nothing. What can we do? Well, everybody knows what has to happen to alcoholics and addicts before they change. They have to hit bottom, even rock bottom. So how did that happen for this alcoholic? Well, I can tell you, I was out drinking Chivas Regal Scotch with an attorney friend one Saturday night. And if you know anything about Scotch, by the way, you would know that mean it was his. And I don't remember getting home that night. I do remember waking up the next morning, which means that I had slept through church. Now, sleeping through church is not the worst thing in the world unless you happen to be a pastor at that church. I don't know how the other religions are, how the other Christian churches are, but I'm pretty sure Lutherans are really narrow-minded about points like this. They really expect the reverend to be there. So that was hitting bottom for me. But what happened there would not have been bottom if a lot of things had not happened before that. And that's where we get this simple analogy of flashing your brights. I don't know why this is moving automatically, so I'm going to take it back. The analogy is simple. It's that one, it's a little dated. When I'm driving down a highway and I see a car coming toward me with its headlights out, I just don't jump out of the car and yell at them to get their lights on, but I also don't do nothing. I flash my brights at them. What we can do with people who are in trouble with alcohol and other drugs is to flash our lights at them. I went to a Lutheran seminary. I look at the world through Lutheran glasses. So, So I want to talk about some really basic theology. This is a lot more complex. It's a lot more complex than I can get into or than we have any time for. But basically, the idea behind this complex theology is in our teaching, and I look at the world through Lutheran glasses. This is not the best photograph of me, by the way. But anyway, I look at the world through Lutheran glasses, and so we talk about law and gospel. Or we talk about sin and grace, or we talk about bondage and liberation. There's two very basic ideas. And we said it's all about that. The law of God not only tells us what to do and what not to do, but the moral law is also a lot like a natural law. You can violate the natural laws if you want to, but you do it at your own peril. You want to violate the law of gravity? Just step off the roof of the building and see how it works for you. The law of God, the moral law, works really quite similarly. It not only tells us what to do and what not to do, don't kill, don't steal, honor your parents. It also tells us how life works. If you don't kill people in your heart with hatred and resentment, your life is going to work a lot better. If people respect one another's property, everybody's life works a lot better, and so on. So the law of God tells us what to do, what not to do, but mainly it really tells us how life works. And it says, if you obey the law, God will love you. The grace of God tells us how God works. And the way God works is, if you break the law, God will not stop loving you. God will join you in your pain and help you see ways around that and help you to grow so that you don't do this anymore. So that's what we're looking at when we're looking at this very basic overrun of theology. I don't care how many people are here, I may be the least sophisticated theological person in the room. Anyway, what do you think of when you hear the word or see the word intervention? What I'm afraid of is that people see this. Somebody goes to the reverend or to the counselor and says, I don't know what to do. My loved one is a mess. They're using drugs all over the place. And that person, then that counselor, that clergy is supposed to tilt back their 10-gallon hat and say, don't you fret none, Nell. I'll round up the intervention posse and we'll drag that doggy off to treatment. If that's what you see when you see the concept of intervention, that's too bad, because it really shouldn't be that way. This is, here's some mythology that just has driven me up the wall over the years. 5 terrible, horrible, no good, very bad intervention myths. Number 1, it's up to us to get that other person straightened out. No, it's not. Number 2, we have but one chance to make this thing work. And therefore, number 3, this is going to be a totally high stress situation, because the only thing that we can do that will mean success is get that person into inpatient treatment. And otherwise, we really can't do anything. This is all crystal clear nonsense. There are scores of things that you can do. There are many things that were done with me as an alcoholic prior to me entering recovery, or if you prefer, recovery entering me. So this is your handout, page 1. This is for those of you who are more global in your learning style. Page 2 is for those of you who are more linear, and page 2 people will get down there in a minute. But this is the basic picture. You see in that darker center circle, the delusional system or the fixed false mindsets of somebody with a substance use disorder. Selective memory, low self-worth and shame, misinformation about alcohol, drugs, and their impact, the delusion that it's under control, that's the spoken delusion. The actual felt delusion is, I can't change, this is too much. And the tools we have for intervening with them, for shining light into the darkness of their delusion. The more light that goes into the darkness of their delusion, the more likely they are to see reality and begin to make the changes they need to make. So we can say what we see, we can be factual, we can say how we feel, not all of our feelings, we can say our feelings of care and concern. We can give people correct information. We can take care of the business on our side of the boundaries and say what we need. And this is especially good for folks who are in church professions, clergy professions. This one is, say there is hope for change. People like this because it's simple, it works for other issues, it even appeals to high-risk drinkers. We used to do this training with college students, and many of whom like their drinks. And excuse me, they would say, yes, we can use that. Number 1, to say what you see, because the delusion is bad memory, selective memory. Selective memory, especially because of euphoric recall. I remember things not so much by what I actually saw, but that warm, rosy, happy, drunk feeling that I had while I was doing it. So I don't remember things the way they happened, even if I do remember them. If we're going to shine light into this, then we're going to have to be factual. I worked with a guy in another seminar, and we will spend a half an hour helping people understand what the word factual means. It's tough. Here's the basics, though. It means, what did I see and hear in your behavior? Not my opinion about it, not my diagnosis of it, but what did I see and hear in your behavior? What did I see or hear in the results of your behavior? So I saw you kick the door in, or maybe I didn't see you kick the door in, but I see that the door is kicked in. So I'm seeing the results. We avoid diagnosing. Are you kidding, Otto? This guy's an alcoholic. That's a fact. No, it's not. That's a matter of opinion. Having been a licensed counselor, it was a matter of a professional opinion, but still just an opinion. We can shine light into that selective memory by saying what we see. And here are some examples. Lady came to see me. I was sober about 3 years, serving a small church out in western Kansas. She says, my husband's an alcoholic. I was really excited to help her because I didn't know a lot about running a church, but I sure knew a lot about working with alcoholics. I didn't know if her husband was an alcoholic or not. All I knew, it was his wife's opinion that he was an alcoholic. Fortunately, there was a really good counselor in town, and he helped coach us through this. When she spoke with him, she said things like this. You know, when you discipline our children and you've had a few drinks, you sometimes use foul language. Now, these were little kids. And he got offended, you know, well, I can't believe you're bringing this up. I love our children as much as you do. She says, yeah, I know you love the children as much as I do. That's why I know it's the alcohol that's the problem. You never talk that way to our kids when you're sober. One of the best interventions that was ever done with me was during a party where I got so loud and so obnoxious, nobody else could carry on a conversation. Our host simply stopped playing the music and began recording me. And then he replayed it, and suddenly I was listening to the same obnoxious fool everybody else had been stuck listening to. He was absolutely factual with me about my behavior. This is a strong suit for people who are in the religion field. When we tell people we care, they believe us. We really, and because we really do care. We can care for the person and concern about the problems we see. This is sharing God's grace with people. Being factual is being about the law. It's being about sin, if you will. Showing people their bondage. Saying how we feel, sharing that concern. That's grace. So how do we do that? One of the better interventions, one of the first interventions done on me was done by a college professor. I'd been drunk at his home a few evenings before, spilled my drink all over everything, was very clumsy in my drunkenness. He brought me into his office a few days later, and among other things, he said, I'm concerned your drinking might be a problem for you. Of course, I denied it. Oh, no, Dr. Haas, I don't think so. And it was so uncomfortable that I got the dickens out of his office as fast as I could. But it always stuck with me. He wasn't mad. He wasn't putting me down. He just said he was concerned about it. I could no longer carry the delusion that my drinking had had no impact on him because he'd expressed his concern. A friend of mine, a colleague, a priest, he'd been to treatment, he was relapsing, he tried to quit again, he relapsed again. The authorities in his church had been after him, Max, you got to change for the sake of the Lord and the people you serve and so on. Somebody sat down with him, a layman in his church sat down with him and said, Max, you're one of the finest men I know. And it really hurts me to see what your drinking is doing to you. Totally new concept to Max that he was worth quitting for, that he was worth having a healthy, sober life for. We express that care and concern, and that grace of God shows through. Now, almost always you're going to use those first two tools because you got to have something to talk about. Those are your facts, and you have to have some motivation to say it. You got to have, some care and concern. These other three tools come up from time to time. I can say what I know. That is, I can give people information. There's many myths in the heavy drinking community and in the illegal drug using community, but they all boil down to, it can't hurt me. And this is not only about formal education. Formal classroom education was real important in my recovery. Learned two important lessons when they required me to take the seminary's class on alcohol and drug abuse. One of them was help was with Alcoholics Anonymous, and the other one was, now hear this, an alcoholic is somebody who cannot consistently control his or her drinking. Different definition that had gone into my head, which was an alcoholic was somebody who consistently lost control. Big distinction there. Working as a chaplain at a treatment center, once in a while I would find some young person who would say, well, yeah, Otto, but marijuana is like a natural product, so it really can't hurt you. And I would say, so is rattlesnake venom. Well, Chaplain Otto, God made it. Figured I was a chaplain. I couldn't argue with God. Little did they know. Well, God made tornadoes too. That doesn't make them safe to play in. Marijuana is a natural product. The false equivalence is, well, if it's natural, it has to be good for you. Total nonsense. But common belief. You're less likely to get hurt in a car crash. That's also total nonsense. If you're drunk, you're less likely to get hurt in a car crash. Total nonsense. There's all kinds of data about that. I interviewed about 250 people in our treatment program some years ago, 250 adults. And I asked them about who are all the folks, who are all the people who have said something to you about your drinking or drugging, all the people, all the agencies. And they said, on the average, they identified between 10 and 11 different people or agencies as having said something to them. I always asked them about their kids. If they had any of their kids. Those with minor children, 20% of our patients identified minor children as having said something to them about their drinking or drugging. Now, remember, many of the adult patients didn't have minor children. Their children were adults or they didn't have children. So it's a really high proportion of those with minor children. One guy said, well, my kids never actually said anything, but every time there was a drunk driving commercial on television, my 6-year-old would make sure that I saw it. Okay? You do not have to be thoroughly knowledgeable. You don't have to have the counselor's knowledge to say something, to give somebody a new piece of information. You just need to know what you know and be willing to share it when that teachable moment arises. So this is a tool you use once in a while. Here is that delusion that we so frustratingly hear. I know what I'm doing. I got this under control. It's not a problem. The changes we can make is to say what we need and to take care of our needs. We can stop doing the things that enable the disease, maintain our boundaries. I cannot resolve somebody else's problems with alcohol or drugs. I can only resolve the problems I'm having with their drinking. And in the religious context, especially for a religious professional, we often have to give people the permission, the family permission to enforce painful consequences. I can't let my son go out in the street. Your son is 28 years old. He's got friends. He'll surf couches. He'll sleep in his car until he finds a place. He's going to be able to take care of himself. We got to give people permission to do that, and permission that this is the way God wants them to act. Because what they're doing now in letting that son live in the basement, rent-free, mom's doing the laundry, honest, these are real cases. Mom's doing the laundry, mom's buying the dinner. She's going to do the best service for him by kicking him out of the house. I want to tell you about my late wife. Sandra was a probation officer. A couple times in the middle of the night, we had neighbors waking us up. We knew our neighbors were stoners. How do you know if a neighbor is a stoner? Yeah. Well, if they have a dog named Kilo, that's a pretty strong indicator. Anyway, but they always looked like it. They just looked like the classic stoner. Anyway, they woke us up a couple times. They were playing their music loud. I mean like 2 a.m, middle of the night. So Sandra went over there the next morning, the second time. She went over there the next morning. She says, two times in the last 3 weeks, you've been playing loud music in the middle of the night, wake up my husband and me. Okay, so she reviewed the facts, not assuming they would know this. She reviewed the facts, and then she said, if it happens again, we'll call the police. Okay? We could not solve their problem with their drug use. We could solve our problem. We could take care of our needs, which was to get a good night's sleep. In so doing, we put down our boundary. Oh my goodness, you say she made a threat. You're not supposed to make threats. Oh, she made a good threat. What's a good threat? A good threat is credible and enforceable. She can do it, and she will do it. I'm going to tell you, if my wife said she will call the police, you knew she can call the police, and she will call the police. Where threats get in trouble is because people make empty threats. They're either not credible or they're not enforceable. You keep doing those drugs, you're going to die. Well, that's not my threat to make. I'm not going to kill you. If you do that again, I'll never speak to you. They know darn well I'm going to give in sooner or later and start talking to them again. Good threats are credible and enforceable. When family people start attending the 12-step recovery groups for families, they attend Al-Anon, that's an intervention all in its own right because they're taking care of themselves. Here again, we have another strong suit for clergy and other people of faith. This is the heartfelt belief, I can't change. The drug is too powerful. Everybody around me is like this. I just can't change. And we can say, not only is there hope for change, there is help for change. We can be familiar with the resources in our community and connect people to that help. Sometimes we walk people right over to the person who can help. We offer hope for change. Our God is bigger and better and more gracious and loving than any old phony false God like alcohol or drugs that you can dream up. What do I do when somebody says, I'm just too bad, I've gone down too far? You know what I've said? Buddy, you ain't that big a deal. God is a much bigger deal than you are, and any terrible things you've done, God can overcome that. I don't have time to go into the parable of the alcoholic and codependent. You can look it up in the Christian New Testament. It is Luke chapter 15, usually called the parable of the prodigal son. Both sons are lost. One is just like an alcoholic, and the other is absolutely a self-righteous codependent. The key to that story is the father goes out to get each one of them. The Father's love never falters. God's love for us never falters, no matter whether we're lost in our own righteousness or we're lost in our own unrighteousness. God's love keeps coming after us. So what's new? Well, come on, you know how to communicate care to people. You know how to be factual with people, probably. This is a toolkit you can use to plan when you need to talk to somebody, and it's also a toolkit which I can tell you for sure I have used for 40 years. I'm listening to somebody, I'm talking to somebody who's got some problems, and I go through those 5 tools in my head and say, which ones can I make use of and how do I use them? So I use them in informal interventions. Now, there's more to learn. We're going to have a seminar, a 4-session seminar starts, I think, the 30th of July. But we're going to talk about things like codependency, sin, and disease. We'll talk about the stages of change, and we'll talk about the kinds of things your congregation can do. I also want to talk, I got about 3 minutes here, so I'm going to roll with this. Today, I am working with the Center for the Restoration of Impaired Clergy, which that building is not, but I really like that building. So anyway, so I put it up there just for fun. Anyway, we are just a bunch of folks, not these folks, but we are a bunch of folks of faith, and we are trying to do the right thing to help restore clergy who have been impaired by alcohol, drug, other addiction issues, mental health issues, restore them to health, help denominations and judicatories to adopt the right kind of policies to restore them to health. This is our vision, that those leaders in those judicatories use the best practices. Many of them have some good practices, but they don't have the best practices, and they don't have the comprehensive approach. It's a really simple thing to do. adapt the successful impaired professionals programs from other professions, medicine, law, transportation. We want to adapt those programs to restore the careers and health of clergy. Wait, what? This was a layman who asked me this. Shouldn't the church have been leaders in this? Yeah. Other professions started as long ago as 40 years. It's time we got rolling on this. Clergy have behavioral health problems. Surprise! I don't think so. We've got problems, actually, to a greater extent. I think we're going to be able to prove this with a pile of data. It freaks me out that we even need to approve this, but clergy have problems with behavioral health, probably at higher rates than the average folks. The result is we get spiritual damage to our clergy as well as material damage to them and to our congregations, and spiritual damage to our congregations. And the core problem behind that is most church bodies just don't have a comprehensive approach to this. So we think it's pretty logical if other folks have successful comprehensive programs for impaired practitioners, we can adapt those programs, and the result will be more clergy saved for their ministries, for their work, and more congregations nurtured through difficult times. I got a minute left, George. Give me one more minute. I want to talk about Stan. Stan and Vicky are in your handouts. Stan was a good pastor in a suburban congregation. It's just that he had an anger issue. And it was never a problem until a megachurch moved in a mile away. That skyrocketed Stan's anxiety, which made his anger come up to the surface. If you experienced Stan's anger or saw it with somebody else, you knew he had a serious problem with rage. If you didn't see it, you only knew he was a good pastor and a kind man and pretty darn good with the young people too. This created division in the church. Finally, Stan was asked to leave because of his rage, and that split the congregation. People had left because of the rage. Now people left because they felt he was being treated unfairly, and 2 years later, that congregation closed. Pastor Vicky, on the other hand, had a very harrowing experience. She was on her way to her stash early one Saturday morning when a knock came at the door, and there were 3 elders asking to talk to her. Now, any of the clergy in this group know very well, if you got 3 elders knocking on your door early Saturday morning, that can't be good. They caught her before she got to her stash, and they talked to her about her drinking problem, their concerns about her health, the impact it was having on the congregation, and they kept talking, and she was getting shakier and shakier as they talked, and so she agreed to go to treatment. And then she did something quite miraculous, I think. I think the work of the Spirit was going on here. They said, "What do we tell the congregation?" She said, "Tell them the truth." What that meant was that when she returned from treatment, they could heal together. They could face the past pain and problems together, and they could heal together. And so Pastor Vicky and that church served their Lord for another 7 years together. That was success. What we're looking for in our operation is fewer pastor stands, more people like Pastor Vicky who get help. I think that's the Center for the Restoration of Impaired Clergy, and this is how you can reach me, especially if you want to know more about that. George is here, and he's given me the cutoff, and that takes care of it, George. Back to you. Thanks.
Wow, thank you so much. That was amazing, brother. Can you hear me?
I can.
You can. Good. Well, then hopefully everybody else can as well. Hey, everybody, if you've got some questions, please put them in the chat now, because we're going to bust into a time of question and answers. So please, right now, as I'm kind of giving you this breakdown, write your questions down. So here's the breakdown, folks. We know there's an addiction problem. We know as a society that churches are ill-equipped and unprepared to handle the addiction problem, the problem with relapse or overdose or understanding conversations like interventions. We don't know what we're doing. But we here at the Center of Addiction and Faith are trying to make a difference by educating the church leadership, by making a difference, by taking our experiences and bringing them to the forefront so that others may find hope, may find that lesson that they need in order to walk alongside someone. But this isn't free, right? We have bills to pay and we have expenses that to stay in operation, we're really struggling right now. And so if you could, please donate to the organization. It is an organization that is on the cutting edge of making a difference. Where other people want to talk about a problem, we're trying to make a difference with a problem, but we need your support. And so it's one thing to tune in and to listen and to learn, and that's a great thing. But it's a whole other thing to do the next step, which is to actually put your resources to work and donate. And so you can head over to our website, or I think we have some links right now. I can see them in the chat where you can donate to the organization and help us to keep doing the amazing work that we're doing. And as always, we're grateful for anything that you give. So thank you very much. So Reverend Otto Schultz, man, that was awesome, brother. I loved it. It was phenomenal. To put it in, the 5 steps like that, or would you say they're steps, or would you say they're
tools? So, because you can't, a lot of times you're not going to use all of them. If you think of them as steps, then you feel like you got to use them all. Sometimes all I got is a fact. Sometimes all I've got is my concern. I don't even have much of a fact. I just know I'm uncomfortable. And so I can express that care and concern and say, well, listen, if it gets to be a concern for you, you can reach out to me because I'll be here to help. And they can say, well, just kiss my foot, Schultz. You don't know what you're talking about. Okay.
So my question is, how important is it for us to have next steps for the person before we enter into these conversations?
It all depends on what you have. If you're going to be, and I mean, it's like, if I've got just a couple facts, then all right, I'm going to talk about those facts. And it's important for me to know, okay, where would I like to refer this person if they are ready to do something next? If I got an AA friend here that would be happy to just meet with them and visit with them. Have I got another friend in recovery? Have I, is there a therapist, a counselor that I talk to who I know understands? They may not be of our faith, but they understand the role of faith and its importance to us. Whatever, then I've got a counselor like that I can refer to or and so on. So it's important that we have some kind of next step in mind. I mean, it's like, we don't expect them to say yes. Well, then they do when we're not ready. So
yeah,
it is important to have a next step.
Okay. We got a question from Deborah. How do you address the addiction and mental illness problem when they're together?
And this, it is much more complicated because sometimes if it's just an addiction problem, letting somebody meet painful consequences is really the right thing to do. But sometimes if they have, let's say, a schizophrenia or something, a really severe mental illness where they're divorced from reality, then then we do things differently. We take charge and we maybe start making some decisions for them that somebody who's only alcoholic, I'm usually just not going to be making decisions for them. I'm going to say, here's the boundaries, like that. So it's a good question, Deborah, and I mean it's a difficult question, one that like if you have a specific situation, reach out to me and we can talk our way through that.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, folks, you still got a few minutes to get your questions in for Otto, so please do so. But I wanted to ask you, Reverend Otto, how often do you think you see people that are only diagnosed with addiction? Because in my experience, maybe it's the clientele I have, I would say 75% of the people that I work with are dual diagnosed. So what about you?
Yeah, if you're thinking about I worked in a hospital with a psychiatric unit, so we had lots and lots of dual diagnosis because of the way we were identifying our clientele, as you say. If you're including things like anxiety disorders and depression, so you've got alcoholic depression. If you're including things like those kind of mood disorders, then yeah, I'm thinking like 75%. If you're thinking more along the lines of the bipolar type 1, which is the real extreme ups and downs, or schizophrenia, psychoses of various kinds, yeah, that's not so much. But when you get into the mood things, then there's a lot that ties in.
Okay. So Reverend Annie Gonzalez just asked, now you're going to be doing the seminars this summer, but she asked, are there going to be additional sessions this summer? And are they going to be an hour each time? How is the presentations going to be?
The 4 sessions that we do will be 90-minute sessions. They start July the 30th.
Yes.
And they go once a week then through the first 3 weeks in August. And there we will be covering this specific issue more thoroughly, but we'll also be broadening out to understanding codependency. Clergy should have like a whole codependency course when they're in seminary. We just should. We're just so prone to that. We'll be covering codependency, relationship between sin and disease, and some other relevant issues. But we will be digging in deeper, and we'll be talking about recovery. How do you walk with somebody in recovery? And that is a very, very good question. One of the great things is a whole nother deal, which is faith partners. And faith partners is about developing teams within congregations that address alcohol, drug issues, very frequently consisting of people who are in recovery who really want to walk with other people who are struggling with recovery.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Did this other question there, are there synods and judicatories that are making headway in identifying and helping addicted clergy, and what are they doing?
Yeah, there are. I can tell you, we started here in the Nebraska Synod of the ELCA. That's our regional body. And we started, and I said, oh, well, you know what, we'll just need to get to the policies and the practices that I'll call the Episcopalians, I'll call the Methodists, they're way ahead of us on these issues. I'll call some other folks. And everybody I called said, yeah, you know what, we don't have much more than you guys have. So there are, and they have different things going for them, but bringing it all together, employee assistance program, sound health insurance that also covers substance use disorders and mental health issues, policy. What they often lack is something at the policy level for the judicatory, and then education for their staff, education and guidelines for lay leaders in congregations. What are you supposed to do if you suspect the reverend has a problem?
Yeah.
Well, we are developing the guidelines and the stuff that will help them walk their way through it in an organized and productive way. That's what we're up to.
That's good. Wendy just had a great question. Speaking of codependency, can you speak to the intersection of other addictions, alcohol, drugs, food, sex, or gambling?
Yeah, having worked in treatment with people who are new to recovery and in AA where people are new to recovery too, you get this idea, well, alcohol was my problem. I used to like to go up to the boats and, roll the dice and stuff once in a while. So I think I'm going to do that. I think that'll be okay. Well, here's my problem. My problem is addiction. And the face that was most pronounced in my case was alcohol. But if we push that face back in, I'm at risk for another face of addiction to come out. And it can easily be something like sex or gambling, or in my case, work. Now, where people get upset with you when you have an alcohol addiction, people like you to do even more work when you have a work addiction. But that was how I controlled my early alcoholic depression. And that was also that was also the face of addiction that came out. Another face of my addiction is codependency. And I'm in partial recovery from codependency. And here I am probably in partial recovery from work addiction because I'm awfully old to still be working, but I just love it so. So I have a good excuse. It's my holy calling. What can I say? So.
Yes. Don't you love that? When you can put a face on it. So do you think it's more important to work on the behaviors of addiction or get to the root of why the addiction in the first place?
Well, I think about the reason I'm addicted to alcohol is because there's a different way that my brain processes alcohol, and that's why that became my primary addiction. I haven't really been able to fix that by working a spiritual program, a program of spiritual disciplines, and moving my life in a good, orderly direction. I can get myself farther and farther away from where that first drink triggers the disease. And that's what I need to be doing. Now, I had a wonderful childhood. Parents who did whatever they could do for their children. I mean, our parents would do anything for the well-being of their children. They had their problems, but I had a good childhood. I didn't have childhood trauma. Lots of people with addictive disorders have multiple childhood traumas. Well, yeah, once a person's brain gets cleared out of the drug, we need to do work on making peace with those childhood traumas and coming to terms with them. And I'm just using that as one example. And the childhood trauma, I may have drank or used in order to manage the unspoken pain that came out of that childhood trauma. So I certainly have to address those issues as part of my recovery.
Yeah, that's good. One more question. So this is from the host, George. What about you keep mentioning the 12 steps. What do you do with a person who's adverse to the 12 steps and wants something different? What are some of the other recovery programs that you advise people to?
People do, especially religious people who are conservative and conservative called evangelicals, conservative evangelicals. Celebrate Recovery it has a good national reputation, and we have some in town here, and there are people who just are not going to touch a 12-step recovery. They're going to get all the principles that are the same in a 12-step recovery and Celebrate Recovery. Almost anybody who gets recovery really follows the principles that the 12 steps are built on. It's different. They use different language. I had a brother-in-law who stayed sober for many years. Then he relapsed. Then he got into 12-step recovery. But when he stayed sober, he recovered his religious faith. He got involved with a community of caring people. He did the stuff that's in the, he made amends to the people he'd hurt. He did the stuff that's in the steps.
Yeah.
So it's not that the 12 steps are magic by themselves, but the principles on which they're built are principles that people have used for recovery from all kinds of issues, from all kinds of religious faiths and non-faiths, because those principles are sound.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that helps much. Lots of times when I meet people who are reluctant about 12-step recovery, they're reluctant about doing what they need to do, whether it's in a 12-step recovery program or not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Reverend Schultz. Amazing seminar. Really appreciate it. Want to just remind everyone that he will be coming back starting July 30th, and then it'll be going for 4 sessions on August 6th, the 13th, and the 20th. If you didn't catch what he said, they're going to be 90 minutes long. So there is a link in the chat for you to sign up. It is $50 to attend, but it is totally worth the cost. So I highly recommend that. Just a reminder that Roseanne Forte's group is still meeting. I believe, I'm not sure how many more sessions they have. That may be in the chat. But then the other group that is coming up is Christina Dent's book study on her book, Curious. So if you're interested in talking to other people about shifting away from the criminal justice approach to drugs and addiction, which I highly recommend, if you're passionate about health-centered solutions, but not sure how to communicate these ideas, sure, it can be confusing and polarizing or just plain. This book and this book study will answer a lot of those questions. And so it'll be Tuesdays at noon. And it looks like it'll begin June 11th and then the 18th and the 25th. It is 3 sessions. So that is what we have coming up. All those links are in the chat. I just want to thank everyone for coming, and thank you to you, Reverend Otto Schultz. It has been a pleasure, my friend. We overcame many obstacles to get through today. So, hey, in the end, we made it. So just like our recovery, sometimes you have to persevere.
Yep.
So thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll see you again next time.
Thank you, everyone.